Coffee for Closers. Today we're talking all about estate planning, continuing our conversation about how to become a bigger, better, more well-rounded advisory. We're talking with Brian Benham, National Sales Trainer for our federal program, amongst other programs. But I always want to bring Brian into these pictures, these conversations, because he, for one, and there's a few other advisory shops that are here at Megastar that have followed suit on what Brian's put together. But he does everything for his clients, or attempts to do as much as he can for his clients. And one of the key attributes that he's really committed himself to over the years is estate planning. He is an incredible knowledge base on the whole process, why he's done it, how it's helped his business grow. And I wanted to bring him on today to talk about all of the nitty gritty of that, having that resource in office and the referral source and everything. So Brian, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. And I appreciate it.
Always great. Always enjoy it. And estate planning is certainly part of our bag of tricks that we share with our folks. And I think it's, frankly, I've always called it the foundation on which everything should be built. And you've heard me say that before.
Sure.
And it's an active part of our program. It's not a money source. It's just something that we do because people need.
Yeah.
And that's why that we get involved with it.
Yeah. We were talking about this before we did the show, Brian, and it's super important to be doing this for the right reasons. Obviously, you can't be doing this for the wrong reasons at all. But it is a huge credibility builder and separator between other advisors. The Edward Jones guy down the street, he's not talking to them about a proper estate plan, or likely isn't. The Raymond James guy, these people that we compete with on a daily basis, this estate planning feature is kind of shocking the client into, wow, this guy is an expert in his field. He knows all the different angles to approach a true sound retirement plan or transition of assets plan, like really firm understanding on a lot of subjects. Maybe I should listen to him. So maybe talk to us a little bit about why you started doing estate planning, lay some foundation on that, how the program or your relationship with your attorney works. And then we could talk a little bit about how others might get going.
Okay. Well, let's kind of go back and let's discuss our responsibility. And this is something that caused me to enter into this side of planning, because I remember, and I think I mentioned this in a training video over the last couple of years about, I took a continuing education course. We all do. As a matter of fact, mine's due, I think, in March, so I got to get on the ball. But I took one back in 1994-ish, around that time.
Right. And
I'll never forget one of the questions, or what it was about estate planning. And it talked about how, not the question, but in the study guide, it talked about as an insurance agent, you have a responsibility to share with your client post-death transfer of asset options.
Sure.
As example, and they give examples. They talked about wills and trusts and power of attorney and all this. And it just made sense to me because, we are estate planners too. Now, we can't carry that as our title, but when you change a beneficiary on a life insurance form, you're doing a form of estate planning.
Right.
And even in the legal world, they look at that as a form of an estate plan. Very important. And then, just a side note, has nothing to do with a will or a trust, but daggone, make sure that you as an advisor have a good trail of beneficiaries on all of your contracts that you write for people, both life insurance and in the annuity business you have.
Right.
Because I still come across people that have, the estate of as a beneficiary. So how can you have something the estate of? That sounds like estate planning to me.
Yeah.
So rather than you putting in the word as a beneficiary, the estate of, when we put in Alex Wellings, my son, that's the same thing. That's estate planning.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to take it back around full circle to what we really want to talk about today, you said something, and I'm really glad you said it. You said, do it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
Back in the 90s and primarily 90s, and this kicked in, I think, late 80s throughout the 90s, there were a lot of trust mills out there. And I remember an organization out of Texas, I'm not going to mention who they were, but I believe out of like 3,037 estate plans that they did or trusts that they did,
wow,
I believe 37 of them or some crazy number was actually signed and done by the attorney. The rest of them, documents were created in the back room, and they had the impression that they were a law firm. And so
Gotcha.
because of that, we always tried to look at how can we be involved with this and do it right, because clients need this.
Yep.
This is a service that they need desperately, and it's really an easy topic to breach, because
Sure.
people just kind of shrug their shoulders when you ask them, do you have a will or a trust? And I'll tell you, there are questions. Either it's a very positive, yeah, we took care of it,
Right.
or probably 80% of the time they're kind of like, no, we talk about it, we've never done anything.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to do is just try to help. You said well-rounded. Get people to understand this is something that you need to take care of.
Yeah.
And for Sheila and I, I'm soon to be 60. I think I've had an estate plan for years, and Sheila, much younger than me, we've had an estate plan for years, and we have a trust, and we also have a sub-trust for the benefit of Jack, the special needs portion. Mm-hmm. So we recognize this just from our experience.
Sure.
But it is something you need to do, and whenever I say do it for the right reason, some folks right now that are watching this video are thinking, what's that question that keeps coming up on applications like F&G or American Equity or Allianz? Is this sale a direct result of a trust sale? I don't remember exact wording of the question.
Yep.
And that's where we need to be careful. I want everybody to know that we're not encouraging you to go out and try to sell a trust, because you can't sell a trust. You're not an attorney. But to sell a trust, to try to gain access to people's financial documents. If you're going to help people and maybe engage them through this process, you need to do it because it's something that they need. And you recognize that you want to help them. And in a minute, I'll talk about the process, but that's the most important part of this.
Yeah.
I know early on, we were on the other side, and back in the 90s, we had arrangements with, I think in Indiana, we had about 17 attorneys that we used.
Wow.
So we weren't a trust mill. We would actually, I always kind of talked about how we would, as soon as we earned a client, we gave it away.
Right,
And
you give them to the estate planning attorney. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we would engage the client to help with our services. Then we would pass them off to an attorney. An attorney would do the legal documents, do a phone call or a personal visit. They would create all the documents, and then we were able to come back in and witness and witness while the client executes their documents. But that was our process. Mm-hmm. The unfortunate process in the old days, which kind of tainted the industry, was trust mills would do that, no attorney involvement, and that's why it got
so
cloudy.
Is that the significant difference then? Is that how does the conversation differ from somebody doing it right and somebody doing it wrong with the client? Is that they're bamboozling them somehow into thinking that they're doing this, they can, me the advisor, I can do this estate plan for you right here right now, versus I'm going to have my estate planning attorney or an estate planning attorney I work with come and sit down with you, consult you on your options, and potentially help you put something together? I mean, is that the difference in the conversation? And if so,
that's probably the difference. And if you do have that arrangement where you have an attorney that's local that you work with closely,
right.
Wonderful. That's fantastic. And then I would get that attorney involved, in every situation you can. I know through Pro Navigator, and that's the discussion we've had before.
Right.
Pro Navigator allows an agent anywhere in the country to use their online system. Right. But in that online system, that the questions are set up by the attorneys to walk you through a questionnaire, and then the attorneys make the decision on what estate plan they should have. Right. And then those documents are actually overseen by the attorney, and that's what I want. Always make sure that any documents you're using, whether of course, if you're using a local attorney, we can assume that they're using their own documents. But if you're using like Pro Navigator or an online version, make sure that an attorney is involved. Right. That's what you want. And you're just the conduit to the attorney. That's all you're doing in that type of a situation. Yeah. But it is a great service. Now, I do like Pro Navigator. We use them quite often. I've got a couple behind me here that I'm going to give to some clients this afternoon. Great system. We have a couple different attorneys that are in that system in Indiana. I don't know which attorney is going to be unless I try to go out and specifically ask for one. Right. But they're involved. And then when they get a little bit more complicated, we had a situation the other day that we had a couple of kids that were with special needs, and that triggers in the system the attorney to do additional work.
Right.
And the attorney called the client and kind of went through some things so they could customize the document.
So the attorney like reached out physically.
Right.
That's great.
And that, I like that. We had another situation where they just wanted some real custom language. I think it was 6 kids, and 3 of the kids still live with mom and dad, and they're going to let them keep the house. And that was just basically a memorandum that was included. But it's not just a trust. We'll talk about the guts of the trust. But whenever we're talking about doing and helping folks engage with an attorney to do an estate plan, it's also those living documents, because you think of a will or a trust as a death document. That really is solid at death. But living documents are your power of attorney, healthcare representatives, and your living will.
Yeah.
And in Indiana now we have a special section in our living will for if you want to be a donor or not, and that's relatively new. But these are living documents that people need. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that folks have is the assumption that I've been married to this person for 30 years, and if something happens to her and she can't make mental decisions, I have the authority to act on her best wishes. And you don't. You don't.
Yeah.
I told the story about my stepson, Jack, with autism, and when he turned 18, even though we paid for his house and his foods and his clothes and took him to Disneyland for the last 10 years, as soon as he turned 18, the court wants to watch the money I spend on him and have a full accounting, because we don't have the authority to act on his best wishes. We had to go through a guardianship to be able to take care of him, and the money that we're acting on is money we give him. So it's insane. But that's how a spouse might be treated in the event one would lose their mental capacity to make decisions, and they didn't take time to sign a simple document that would grant a durable power of attorney through incapacity.
Yeah.
And it's amazing some of the things that I've seen over the years, and living documents are just as important and just as overlooked as the post-death transfer of documents that you'll generally assume as a trust or a will. But if you don't mind, let me kind of just throw in a little bit of education on wills and trusts and what we're actually talking about.
Sure.
And why I think it's so important. Years ago, trusts were used primarily as a tax saving device. Yep. This is back when the unified equivalent tax exemption was down maybe 425,000, but for a long time it was around 600,000. Now that's a big word for me to say, hey, if you had an estate less than $600,000, you escaped death tax. Okay, but if it's greater than that, you're going to pay death tax, and it started at about 37%, then it went up. That exemption has gone up, and I think currently it's 11,000 or 11,700,000, something like that. I might be wrong, but it's real close. And then there was also a way that you could preserve your spouse's credit. So back in the old days, between a married couple, you technically had a $1.2 million cap, that as long as you were under that, no death taxes. But you could use a trust, and a trust would split into 2 sides after the death of the first spouse, and you could shove some of those assets on one side and preserve that credit and avoid a death tax. That was one reason why a lot of the attorneys would use trusts. Now, I'm going to say this, and the attorneys won't like it, but they would use it for that purpose, but they weren't using it for the purpose of the avoidance of probate.
Right.
And that's really what people care about, because the death tax exemption is so high right now that we don't even talk about death tax anymore. It's about the avoidance of probate.
Right.
And that's, to me, what the idea was. And when you think about this probate, this has been around forever in some way or form. I remember studying on this back in the early 80s, and I read a story about back in the Roman times and the concept of transferring assets, and the king would send out his tax collector, and they would charge them for a chicken or a cow, and that's how they do it. But what they did was they started granting all their assets to the church. Okay. And the king didn't have authority over the church. And they'd come out, the tax collector would say, hey, I need a chicken and 2 goats this year. And they said, no, it's owned by the church. So in effect, it was owned by the trust. And that's kind of the concept of a trust. whenever you leave assets in your name, the tax collector or the king could receive some benefit from that. Now, I'm also going to tell you that probate itself isn't that expensive. To go down to the court and spread the will of record, that's what you do when you start a probate. It's probably $120, depending on your county, and some other little miscellaneous fees. The cost of probate is very inexpensive. It's the administration of probate that gets quite expensive.
Right.
And over the years, when I first started doing this, the average attorney back in the 90s, maybe 125, 140 bucks an hour. Now you got attorneys 350, 500, 575 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
The process of probate is extremely expensive, and the cost to the attorney is what causes that process to be high.
Right.
And the question is, do you need it?
Right.
That's the thing. The thing I've always thought about whenever I think about probate, to me, probate is ridiculous. It's crazy. And here's why. There's no mystery that what I have, I want it to go to my kids. What's the mystery?
Right.
That's what I want. It's common sense. Why do I need my kids to pay an attorney $300 or $400 an hour to drag my estate through the court system, to properly transfer my assets from my individual name into the name of my kids, when they all know it's going to get to them anyway?
Right.
And why would I let them drag this system out between 6, 9 months or more, or a year, before they can get everything?
Yep.
That makes no sense to me.
Right.
But that's the process of probate, because probate is a legal process for the transfer of title from a deceased name into the name of a beneficiary.
Yep.
Now, some people say, well, I have a will, and the will avoids probate. Isn't that all I need? That's what my attorney told me.
Mm-mm.
No. As a matter of fact, I will say, did you ask your attorney if you will go through probate? And sometimes people will say, yeah, the attorney told me I won't go through probate. And I said, well, that's absolutely true. And they look at me like, what are you talking about? It is true. You won't go through probate. You asked the wrong question. Your kids are going to go through probate. You're not. So I've seen attorneys say, no, don't worry about it. You won't go through probate. Of course, you're dead. It's your kids that have to relive your death every time they walk up the steps of the probate court.
Yeah.
So how do you avoid that? And the easiest way to avoid it is to create a box. I call it a trust. And it's actually a box or a trust. I'll call it a box. And once I create this box, it kind of looks and smells like a will. It says, hey, this is the Brian Benham Revocable Trust, and Brian's the trustee, and Sheila's the trustee. And all the stuff that's in this box go to my kids.
Right.
Just common sense. Remember what I said, common sense? That's what the trust says. But once you're done creating this, the box is empty. Here's where you have to be careful with what the intention of helping your client is. Because before you can put anything in this trust, you have to know what they have. And that's the issue that we have to be careful with. You don't want to. We're not trying to do this to uncover their assets. I know that it will, but that's not the purpose. We're trying to help people avoid probate.
Right.
Some brokerage accounts, bank accounts, personal property, cars, all these things are subject to probate. So what you do is you transfer title into the name of the trust, unless it's a qualified asset. You transfer title in the name of the trust. And they have the house out here. The house is in Brian and Sheila's name. If Brian dies, it's Sheila's. If Sheila dies, it's Brian's. And that's what a lot of folks think, well, I didn't go through probate when my husband died. No, you're not, but it's going to go through probate when you die. So while Brian and Sheila are alive, we simply take our house, we take it out of our name individually, and we put it into our trust in the name of our trust.
Uh-huh.
Now it's owned by the trust, not me individually.
Yeah.
Now let me summarize real quick. I've got a house, I've got several cars, I've got a bunch of personal property, I've got some accounts that are in my name individually. If I die and when I die, my name doesn't mysteriously come off those assets. It's still on all those assets. So if I would, while I was alive, take my name off those assets and put them in the trust, it's kind of like the church example I gave you. I put them in the church, not owned by me individually, because probate will only act on assets that are left in my name individually. So if you think about it, if I died, what did I leave in my name individually?
Right.
No house, no car, no boat, no bank accounts. Guess what? If I have a will out here designed to take my assets through probate, the will is still valid, but there's nothing to probate because it's all in the trust.
Gotcha.
So it works.
I guess. So if the purpose is clean, right? And I sit down with a prospect, and we come to it that they've got a large sum of assets, right? They've kind of disclosed maybe, I've got a few million, we're worth a few million, and we don't really know what to do with it. And we uncover in our fact finding that this fella and his wife don't have an estate plan currently in place. And I have an attorney, maybe like Lee does. Lee next door, he has in our retail shop here at the home office an attorney that comes a couple times a week, has his own attorney firm, but he comes and like sublets in the office just to talk to his clients, because he knows Lee's got the clientele that are looking for these estate plans. And Lee will refer them over to his office, and they'll have a sit down. But Lee uncovered that they needed the estate plan. They go and they get this in place. And then afterwards, they need to go and obviously put all the assets into this box, as you keep saying. And so at that point, we sit down, and then now we continue our discussion, which, before was about, what Social Security maximum. Maybe they came to a presentation of mine. Maybe they're a federal employee, right? And they came to one of my presentations, or they responded to an appointment request or something like that. And so now after they've gotten their estate plan working, and they come back to start retitling the trust or retitling assets into the trust, now they're sitting in my office, and we're continuing down the line of working towards a financial plan. Do I have to check the box then on the because I officially found out about the asset I'm transferring from the sit down with the attorney and the funding of this trust. But who's to say I would have found out about it anyway? I probably would have, because they initially had come in for a financial plan, and we just discovered that this other thing that I can help them coordinate can be taken care of by my attorney. And now I'm sitting here and we're writing up an annuity as part of our master retirement plan. Do I have to check that box on the Allianz app or whatever?
Yeah, it just depends on the way you worded that, because you worded it in a way that I would say yes, and I would word it in the way I said no. Because when you opened up, you talked about how they claim it as a financial client. And as you went through this, you were able to determine that this client needed an estate plan.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, then I wouldn't click the box, because they came in from that perspective
as a financial.
And I found out, what are you talking about? You got $300,000 over here, and 3 pieces of rental property, which automatically is kind of a must-have in my mind to have an estate plan that uses a trust.
Got it.
Well, all of a sudden I sit down and I find all this out, and I say, hey, you probably have a trust. Now, if I go put a sign out on the street that says trusts are us, and I got people coming in here and we're selling them trusts, and then, oh, by the way, my annuity production goes through the roof, because now all of a sudden I'm finding all these assets.
Clear.
There's why I need to check that box, because that's what we don't want to do. That's not who we are. It's not who Megastar is. And I don't want whoever's watching this to let that be you either.
Right.
We need to determine what people have, to have a clear understanding about what we need to do to help them.
And so if I was going to do an estate planning presentation, I'd need to be, if I was going to do a learning lab, right? Learning lab presentation is going to be all about estate planning. I'd need to be a little cautious about how I work through those appointments.
If you're doing it that way, you need to be careful, because it's, we don't want that to be the device used to uncover assets.
Right.
That's the key.
Has to be happenstance, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And the thing is, it's not like we're suggesting, I'm suggesting people, you should be doing this.
Yeah.
I really believe with all my heart, you should be doing this.
Oh, no doubt.
And to what degree you want to do it, that's up to you. If you have an attorney that's close, great. If you want to use Program Navigator, great. I'm not telling you I'm practicing law. I have an idea about what somebody needs. I don't even say that you have to have a trust. I say, here's how it works. And it's kind of like with, we have this new question about on 401ks, can you move? Who initiated the sale? Did you or did they?
Right.
Well, we've really tried to gear our questions around, here are the options. You can leave your 401k where it is, or we have this option, and this works very well in general for people, or you have this option that works very well for people.
Right.
What would you like to do to move forward? Well, I want that one. Okay, so you're making that decision. You want to use this.
Right.
It's the same way with estate planning. It's like, look, here's how a will works. I'm not talking about your stuff. In general, here's how a will works.
Right.
And in general, here's how a trust works. What do you think's good for you? Well, I want the trust. Probably. That's what I would have picked too. But for you to do that, you need to engage the services of an attorney, either through like Pro Navigator,
Of course.
or through a relationship in your office like Lee has, or somebody that works down the street from you. That'd be fantastic. But the bottom line is, you help them identify a problem. No. You help them identify a solution to a problem that they're well aware.
Yes, that's such the key point. Yep. I mean, honestly, and again, it goes to the point of what we've been talking about on the show for like the last few weeks about taxes and all the ancillary complementary goods of a true retirement or financial planner that one would hire. I mean, it's a credibility factor, a credibility establisher for advisors out there to, go beyond the fact that they're just an annuity salesman. It becomes a problem when you're an annuity salesman. You said that to me yesterday. Now, that's what we've all got to realize as on this show. The show is about building a better practice. And that means expanding our horizons beyond just simply saying we're going to sell just annuities or whatever. It should be that, okay, my annuity sales grow because all of these other services I'm offering are bringing in more clientele, and we're doing all kinds of things. The annuity is just a piece of a giant practice, doing taxes, doing estate planning services, offering potentially, I'm an advocate, obviously, for folks getting security licensed and offering those things because, it establishes more credibility. You've got to establish yourself as an absolute expert in your field. And quite frankly, retirement planning is not only about annuities. It's about a whole bunch of different things. And so to be a true expert in retirement planning, which is what we all hope to be, at least if you're working with Megastar, I hope that's what your goal is to be a master retirement planner, then you need to be an expert on all fronts. And that's what you've done. That's what guys like Tony Gerasi and Cam McCarty, guys that have been on the show recently, have done. And you know that. We were talking about this yesterday. Right. It is absolutely... And again, it does come down to doing it the right thing for the client, right? It's the right thing for the client. And so when you start off in that initial interview, whether they came from a Social Security workshop, whether they're a federal employee or they're a tax client of yours or an estate planning, somebody that just came in because they're referred to you for some odd reason, the fact that you're able in the first few minutes to talk intelligently about whatever topic they came in to talk about, and then bring up the other ancillary issues. Well, have you talked about a tax plan for this? Or have you thought about the tax consequences of the decision that you're thinking about or contemplating? Have you thought about the estate plan? Oh, you plan to pass on this to your kids, and how have you gone about prepping that? And do you fully, you're able to educate on every front, no matter what. You establish credibility, and what prospects do or potential clients do in those instances, again, we chatted about this yesterday too, is they start to defer to the expert. They stop crossing their arms. They start to lean into conversations. They start to really just want to hear what your advice is from there, because now you're something different than they've ever heard before. And I think you've done that better than most.
Well, we met with some folks last week at Fort Wayne, and Kyle was with me up there, and we were talking to the guy. Kyle's in the office with me right now, and we were talking to a guy, and that's how he was. He's back here like this, arms crossed. And by the end of the session, this dude was right up front, leaning into us. And here's why he did that. Yeah. Because in our interview process, I'm asking everything. I'm talking about, do you have a will or a trust? Do you have children? If they're blended marriage, I want to know who has, how many kids do you have, Alex? How many do you have? All those questions, because I'm automatically thinking, when you have a blended marriage, I used this term earlier, must have. Okay. I used to have this must have. And if I would bump into somebody that had a blended marriage, in my mind, they need some help. They need some help. Yeah. If they had over $600,000 way back in the 80s or 90s, that was a must have. Okay. Various different things that in my mind, a special needs child, a must have. But I'm looking for that. Blended marriages are a problem waiting to happen, because it's usually some form of an uneven distribution. That's a problem waiting to happen in probate. That's a contest. Contest drags it out, takes attorneys to fight back and forth. Boom, boom, boom. The bill goes way up. So, but anyway, in our process, and one thing that came to mind is something else you and I were talking about yesterday. I've always said I'm not a great salesman. I'm not a great closer. But the sell, and I don't even like to say it that way, but the sell with us doesn't come at the end. It comes at the start. Yeah. And and you talked about deferring to the expert, because I don't know, I have no clue. I don't go into an appointment thinking I'm going to go grab me an annuity. Oh, this guy, he's got a nice suit, I'm going to sell him an annuity. I don't have any idea. Honestly, I have no idea what service I'm going to provide to this person until I'm through with my interview, because I have learned over the years, first of all, practice what you preach.
Yep.
And we ask about everything. And some people think, what do you want to know about my kids for? Well, I want to know because I'm trying to identify problems. And then after I go through my presentation, I say, okay, here's what I need. I need these documents before we meet again. Yeah. But I might give them a bullet point list. Here's some things I think we need to talk more about. We need to talk about your estate plan. Okay. Yeah. And I don't see that your advisor in the past has discussed anything about taxes. And I'm concerned long-term about taxes. Maybe we could talk about how we can eliminate some taxes on that qualified plan so that in the future we might be able to pull some income from maybe a Roth. And why would I do that? Because your other guy never told you this, but if we can reduce some of that taxable income, we might reduce some tax on Social Security. By the way, Alex, how do you feel about paying tax on Social Security?
Right. Great transition.
Okay? And that's what I'm identifying up front. And I'm giving them a bullet point list of some of the things that we're going to be discussing when we circle back. Okay. Yeah. Now, I also know, because I'm asking them intelligent questions, I'm making them feel a little bit uncomfortable, because I know some of the things that I'm asking are things they know and they knew they needed to get taken care of. Mm-hmm. I might throw in a jab about their other advisor never helping them with taxes. You know, Cameron, I'm sure, did a great job. You all know Cameron does a great job on that. We do the same thing to let them know that, hey, this guy, I'm going to lean forward. This guy's talking to me about stuff I've never had anybody talk to me about before. Yeah. This makes a lot of sense. And by the way, I don't say this to a client, but argue with my perspective. Give me an argument. Mm-hmm. What are you going to say about this guy that's trying to reduce taxes? What are you going to say to this guy that's trying to make sure that my children don't relive my death every time they walk up the stairs of the probate court? Yeah. You know, these are things that they've never considered. They never heard come out of one guy's mouth. And I used to always ask, you know, when's the last time you actually had a meeting around your dinner table with your banker, your attorney, your stockbroker, and your insurance agent? Yeah. And people look at you and think, well, that's never happened. Is that a ridiculous request? It's not at all. Shouldn't all these people know what the other one is doing? Well, in the typical world, none of them know. Nobody knows what the other one's doing. Yep. But in our situation, because we do taxes, we do estate planning, we do financial management, we do insurance, we do all these things, and we bring it together in one location. And that's why I think the estate planning portion is so important. Yeah. Not from a financial rewards situation, about being a good provider to make sure we're putting all of our clients in the best possible position.
Well, I agree emphatically. I think if you are going to call yourself a retirement planner, you need to know and be educated. Maybe you don't need to offer every service, but you need to be able to talk intelligently about a plan on all fronts of the retirement phase. Otherwise, then, you can be a broker or an assets manager or a fund manager or something like that. I mean, you call yourself those types of things, or a financial planner, but a retirement planner does, I think, quite a bit more. And kudos to you. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. In another episode, we'll go into the details of EP Navigator, what all that is, because that's a whole nother ball of wax. But yes, the importance of estate planning is paramount, of course. Brian, thank you so much for sharing so much wisdom. A little unfortunate news here for you. I'm going to say it. You're a great salesman. You're a great business owner as well. I know you don't always like to hear that, but hey, the best of them are experts like you and can phrase things in a way that makes people feel comfortable. And people certainly love to defer to your expertise. I know I do. So thank you again for being on the show. And We'll see everybody right here next time on Coffee for Closers. Take care.